You're with us on the Newsroom. Today is the 40th anniversary of the imposition of the emergency. What we've done is dug deep into our archives to put together for you the best of the images that are available with us, which really show the kind of excesses that happened in the name of the emergency. This is footage that you will not get to see on any other television station because nobody was collecting TV video footage at that time. This really, for my generation, gives a peek into the kind of things that happened in the name of the emergency. Things that you and I can scarcely believe are possible in modern India. But just about 40 years ago, they happened. Here's a report.
In 1971, Bangladesh War and the decisive victory by the Indian Army transformed Prime Minister Indira Gandhi into a deity. She was compared to the goddess Durga. In the euphoria of victory, the Congress swept the polls in the 1972 Assembly elections. Both in the centre and the states, it was preeminent. The Congress by now had been shaped to reflect her personality and preferences. Yet, just 2 years later, Indira Gandhi was to face her most serious political challenge, one that would force the daughter of India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, to jeopardize the very fate and future of Indian democracy itself. Raj Narayan, the socialist candidate who stood against Indira from Raebareli in the 1971 elections, launched a case against her over election irregularities. 4 years later, at the Allahabad High Court, Justice Jagmohan Sinha was ready to deliver his judgment on the 12th of June 1975.
I treat every judgment and every case alike. I never thought that it was a historic judgment. Because if a judge thinks that there is a very important case, then it can sway his judgment.
It was a historic judgment nonetheless. One that found Indira Gandhi guilty on 2 counts of electoral malpractice. It invalidated Indira's election and disbarred her from office for 6 years. Raj Narayan stood triumphant in front of the world press.
The people rejoice and reaffirm their faith in the democratic institutions of India. I accept the judgment with humility.
This judgment came at a time when the opposition had launched a major campaign against Indira Gandhi, accusing her government of rampant corruption. It was led by the aging patriarch Jayaprakash Narayan. The student-based Sampoorn Kranti movement had been gathering strength for months. Every day, in cities across the country, opposition parties had been staging protest rallies against Mrs. Gandhi's rule. The country was coming to a standstill. Sensing the moment was right, the opposition went in for the kill. At the time of her supreme political crisis, Mrs. Gandhi turned to her younger son Sanjay for support and advice. Justice Sinha had granted a stay order for 20 days to give the government time to appoint a new Prime Minister. Sanjay Gandhi and his supporters used this time to arrange demonstrations of support and loyalty. They convinced Indira to fight back.
By one judge in a high court pronouncing a judgment and the opposition of that time saying that that is the end of the matter and we won't wait and Mrs. Gandhi must go, was what we were agitating against.
On the 20th of June 1975, Indira Gandhi's lawyers filed an appeal in the Supreme Court, while Mrs. Gandhi defiantly addressed a massive gathering at the Boat Club in Delhi.
It is my duty to see that nothing is done anywhere in any corner of the world which can cast any reflection on this character of the Indian people.
On the evening of 25th June, the opposition parties announced countrywide protests to force Mrs. Gandhi's resignation.
The call was given to commence an agitation in every part of India. Which government could possibly tolerate a situation of this kind, when not only the people have been asked to revolt, but it is said that the army and the police should treat this as their own struggle.
Siddharth Shankar Ray helped Indira draft a proclamation. It declared that a grave emergency exists whereby the security of India is threatened by internal disturbances.
Then she said, then we should go to the president. I said, yes. Then she said, you come with me. We were with the president, maybe about 2 hours, 1.5 hours. She explained the facts to the president, showed him the reports and everything as to what the position was and what the latest appeal was to the people. What do we do about it? And then I took over. I explained the law that emergency for internal disturbance can be declared if the danger was imminent.
The president, Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad, signed it just before midnight. And for the first time since independence, a state of emergency was declared. Fundamental rights of the citizen were suspended. And Mrs. Gandhi, in effect, became a dictator. Leading opposition figures had been rounded up in the dead of night. JP was arrested. 600 other opposition leaders, including Morarji Desai and L.K. Advani, were also arrested.
Jayaprakash ji has been arrested, Morarji Bhai has been arrested. And then we consulted Vajpayee ji and myself, and we decided to await the police arrival and to leave. So they came at about 7:30 or so and picked us up.
Back in Delhi, just after midnight, members of Indira Gandhi's cabinet were woken up by a phone call. They were told to attend a meeting at 6 o'clock in the morning. The state of emergency declared in the country was to be retrospectively endorsed by the cabinet.
She called her cabinet and informed her about this. And cabinet approved wholly without any objection. Nobody objected. She pointed out everything, threadbare, as to why this was necessary. So this is how it happened.
That night, power was cut off from Bahadur Shah Zafar Marg, the Fleet Street of India, where the offices of almost all the major national dailies are located. Censorship was imposed on the press.
The emergency was declared and there's complete pandemonium in the Times of India office. People didn't know what to do because we were not used to censorship of the press. And this has been, we were given notices that nothing was to publish unless it had been cleared by the censor. When I discussed it with great length and she wouldn't agree with me at all, she said there can be no emergency, no press freedom with emergency. They have to toe the line.
But the emergency placed extraordinary power in the hands of an extra-constitutional authority, a man largely seen as reckless and arrogant. Sanjay Gandhi had gathered around him a bunch of aggressive cohorts who to many people were nothing more than unruly, undisciplined muscle men. It was obvious that Mrs. Gandhi's youngest son was being groomed for higher things. He was the star attraction in the mammoth Youth Congress rally held in New Delhi's Pragati Maidan in 1976.
आमतौर पे किसी युवक को गांव में या शहर में पूछें कि वो मुल्क के लिए कुछ करना चाहता है तो सारे तैयार हैं, मुल्क के लिए कुछ करना चाहते हैं, लेकिन वो ये पूछते हैं कि हम क्या करें मुल्क।
In the Guwahati All India Congress Committee meet, Mrs. Gandhi went a step further. She declared, "The Youth Congress has stolen our thunder."
At that time, the Youth Congress was playing a very active role. We had a very concrete program. And it was a new generation of youth coming in. So it was a new resurgence in the polity of the country. In Guwahati, it was Youth Congress. For the first time, you saw so many Youth Congress banners, you saw so many Youth Congress workers from all over the country. And many of the very older leaders looked alien there. They started looking that what is this happening?
Her official blessings on Sanjay as an alternative power center was the signal for the Youth Congress Brigade to unleash what turned out to be a reign of terror. Inevitable stories of excesses began to surface. In the name of beautification, the capital's Turkman Gate area was bulldozed. Its occupants relocated. But it was the forced sterilization campaign in the name of family planning which gave the emergency its overriding stigma. Sanjay's meteoric rise was helped by the fact that the opposition was silenced, its leaders under arrest, and strict censorship in force. The ruthlessness of the regime came out when George Fernandez, who had gone underground, was finally arrested and produced in court in handcuffs.
It's not just the handcuff. It was handcuffs and chains. Used to be every day when I used to be brought to the court. I and my colleagues used to be brought to the court. We were 22 of us, and as we were, every morning we had to be brought to the court when the trial began, or earlier in that when dates were taken. At that time, plus a chain with which two policemen chained themselves to me, and similarly to other colleagues. That was Mrs. Gandhi's way of telling you that, you know how I can crush you.
On the 18th of January 1977, Mrs. Gandhi, with her instinct for the dramatic, surprised the world by making an unscheduled broadcast to the nation, announcing an end to the 19-month-long emergency. Fresh elections were announced. Insulated from the public mood, Indira Gandhi had underestimated hatred of the emergency and the opposition's strategy. Jagjeevan Ram, the powerful Dalit leader in Indira's cabinet, was the first to revolt. He was joined by H.N. Bahuguna, former UP chief minister who had fallen out with Sanjay Gandhi. His resignation from the Congress party electrified the political atmosphere. 4 non-communist parties merged with the Janata Party under the ascetic Morarji Desai, though JP remained its lodestar. 2 months later, in a stunning election outcome, Mrs. Gandhi was swept out of power.